Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we have got a lot going on in the Big Ten to talk about. We've already got some people in the comments section. Jackson Johnson, what's up, Big Ten Nation? What's up, Jackson? And Brad P says, go Illini. So that's your guy there, Sonny. He's right there with
Love it.
you. So we are going to have a great show today. It is me, yours truly, the Ohio State fan, the sad Ohio State fan. I wouldn't wish my existence upon any of you. Enjoy your good teams. I only hope to have a good team someday. And then, of course, we have Frank from the Boiler Express podcast, Purdue man himself, and Sonny, the Illini cast, Illini man, here to join us. Let's go ahead and let these guys introduce themselves, tell you where you can find them at. Frank, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, name's Frank, aka at the _stat_tank on Twitter, for what was formerly known as Twitter. You can find our podcast at Boiler_Express on pretty much every social media platform. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on YouTube. Definitely come check us out, covering all things Purdue, basketball, football, and as of lately, hockey. So excited to be here, JR, and talk some ball with you.
Very good. Yeah, hockey. That's interesting. I don't think I'll be doing a Big Ten hockey podcast anytime soon, but more power to anybody who does. That's good for them. Sonny, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell people where they can find you at.
I'm jealous, actually. Like I always say, if I ever get FU money, I'm going to self-fund a hockey program for the University of Illinois. I just love the sport so much, and it's the state of Illinois produces so much hockey talent. It boggles my mind that the university doesn't have a program themselves. But thank you, JR, for letting me come on today. Most of you know me from Illinicast. It's an Illinois-based podcast. We have a couple episodes every week talking usually men's basketball, men's football, whatever is in season. You can also find me at Big Ten Show, where we're growing at a pretty rapid pace right now. And that's more of a, if you're a fan of whatever team, we try to sit down and talk to one expert every single week. And Frank, we actually have one of Frank's partners as going to be a co-host, I believe, next Sunday. So if you're a Purdue fan, follow us, and we'll be talking some Purdue.
Very good. Yes. And we got Russ here. Is that your Purdue
That's
expert,
our boy,
Russ? There.
Russ. I'll
There
see
you
you
go.
next
He
week.
says boiler up. This is gonna be good. Yes, it is. We are excited to do this. Let's go. Oh, before we do that, please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If you're listening on podcast, subscribe there. Give us a rating. That helps as well. And this podcast is brought to you by Big Banter Sports, BigBanterSports.com. You can go there for all your Big Ten media needs. Check them out. Good resources. Podcast for every team in the Big Ten. Just growing Big Ten media, because the more we have, the better, and the more we can defeat those stupid SEC guys that nobody really likes. So, because they have a lot of media, we need to compete with them. So, all right, let's move on to our first game. Sonny, your guys, 70-62. Illinois beats Indiana. Was not quite the performance that I think some Illinois fans wanted. I think Illinois fans are still pretty optimistic from this, from what I'm hearing, and I don't blame them for that. Indiana was minus Khalil Ware, but Malik Renew is a really good player. Mackenzie Mbako's coming into his game a little bit more. Xavier Johnson, he was crazy, but he played better in this game. So I don't think there's any shame in it being a bit of a close game this time. But Illinois obviously comes out with the win, remains doing well in the conference. Sonny, what were your thoughts on the game?
You know, to kind of piggyback of what you were saying, it's funny. I've been listening to the national media podcast accounts, and the difference of like opinion of where Illinois is right now is vastly different. The national media is kind of in panic mode, and I'm sure we're about to talk about it right now. Is the team better without Shannon? Is this Underwood's teams all over again, et cetera, et cetera? I'm not in that boat whatsoever. It's like the game is much closer than it should have been, but there's a lot of factors that just didn't go our way either. We shot 15 out of 30 from free throws and layups. We missed some bunnies and missed some free points on our end. And obviously, Indiana didn't make a single three-pointer. And, a lot of people are, me included, I actually got in trouble. JR, I'm a big Underwood guy. I hype up Underwood. I've been on the show talking about how I can't believe Underwood has not been Conference Coach of the Year yet in his career. And all I made was a simple tweet yesterday saying, you know what? Brad Underwood's had a bad week. even to this day, to right now, to this minute, if I refresh my mentions on Illinicast, someone's queuing up some sort of dialogue calling me a hater or whatnot. So, I don't know. It's a sensitive bunch. Again, I'm not too worried. Indiana's not a good team, but they've got a couple NBA players on that team. So, do we have issues? Absolutely. The whole Shannon thing, I'll let you guys talk about your opinion of the games, and we can kind of come back to it. But offense, I'm really not worried about. Defensively, I'm still not sure what Underwood is doing the last couple of games, whether it's with Northwestern and not switching up the constant switching. Northwestern took advantage of that, and we didn't have a way to counteract that. Yesterday was a different idea. It's obviously because they weren't hitting threes. We were guarding the guys, or playing one-on-one down low. Indiana was having their way with it, but what a lot of the national media don't realize is that's kind of our game plan. That is Underwood's, like he's talked about it. What we're going to do is we're going to be super efficient on offense. We're going to let your big guy get the ball down low. Not everyone's Zach Edey. Okay, Zach Edey can overcome this sort of defense, but we'll let you take a contested shot near the hoop. And if you were to miss, we're going to run like hell. We're going to transition. We're going to, try to get quick baskets on our end. He does the math. Frank, you're all about this stuff. He'll trade the threes for the tough twos. And, Illinois to this day is one of the best defensive teams to force you to take tough 2-point shots. So a lot of people are complaining about, all the big men that are having monster numbers against Illinois. I want to say the last 4 or 5 games. But it's by design. So, that's where I'm coming from, just to preview. Yeah.
For the record, I don't think you're a hater, Sonny.
I promise you I'm not.
Actually, I think you're one of the more optimistic people about Illinois basketball. So you're further from a hater than I think. Frank, what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, going right off of what you said there, Sonny, I think that, Indiana hit some of the shots that Illinois was wanting them to take, and they just went in. And I think that Brad Underwood's a smart guy. Like, he's going to live with that. He's going to be like, okay, so like Malik Renew got going really early in this game. And a lot of these were in these kind of like short roll. I'm going to take a, semi-contested shot in the middle of the paint. Like, all right, fine. If that shot goes in, like, cool, you forced a bad shot. One thing I thought was that it's interesting, Illinois won this game, but I was really interested in the dynamic of Indiana here, especially without Khalil Ware, and that, we saw a good game from Xavier Johnson. He did get another technical foul. I know the flagrants and technicals have been piling up for him lately, and he's getting kind of a reputation, unfortunately. But is this like a big question I had circled about this game was, is this the game that like he needed to get going to be a consistent contributor going forward? But ultimately that was the main point, Sonny, I had was that, Illinois was missing shots early on that they normally would make. Indiana was doing the opposite, and things just kind of leveled out there at the end. But one thing, you mentioned that Indiana didn't hit a 3 in this entire game. This morning I had to pull some numbers, pull some data. Over 3,600 games have been played this season. That's only happened 16 times this season where a team has not hit a 3 in a game. And only 2 D1 schools. The other was Baylor, fascinatingly.
Wow.
Interesting.
So I just had to know, like, especially in today's game, that seemed pretty rare. But yeah, I think really another thing to point out too, at least on paper, is IU going for 12 for 2 at the line, or 12 for 22 at the line. That's not going to win you games. So I just feel like it was a game of a lot of variance. Just Illinois missing some early shots, Indiana making some early shots, and things just kind of leveling out there at the end, as they should, and how this game unfolded.
Yeah, I want to touch on kind of what Sonny was alluding to there for a minute. I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit there as well, Frank. But the Terrence Shannon Jr. stuff. We'll talk about Indiana here in a second. But so I have conflicting thoughts on this, because do I believe Illinois is better with Terrence Shannon Jr.? Yes. Do I think Illinois is better right now, like the past couple games with Terrence Shannon Jr.? I don't think they've played as well, but I also think that's because Illinois' game did change a bit when Terrence Shannon Jr. went out. I think it was less less about some of the bad matchups that you can put on people and more about, a non-stagnant offense where guys are constantly moving and obviously cutting and passes being made. Not to say that's not happening now, but it's just not happening at the same level. I think this is going to be a better team with Terrence Shannon Jr. on the court, but when you're asking mid-season an entire team to take away a player, change everything up, and then put that player back in the lineup, change everything back to it, it's going to be clunky. It's going to be a little difficult to put in there. And then on top of that, Terrence Shannon Jr. is not playing his best games. I know he had 12 points in this game, but 2 for 6 from the 2-point land, whatever, and then 0 for 4 from behind the arc. That is not Terrence Shannon Jr. every single night, right? I mean, that's not going to keep happening, but what you are going to see is more of what he did in this game, which I thought was better, was he got to the line more often. He went 8 of 10 from the free throw line, and that's what good experienced players like Terrence Shannon Jr. do, is they say, look, I'm not getting the baskets to go in, so I'm going to go drive into the paint, get a foul, so that way that I can, make an impact from there. Frank, I'm curious what your thoughts are on if Illinois is worse with Terrence Shannon Jr. on the court right now.
Yeah, I mean, I love numbers. I think anyone who's listened to me on here before knows that. And I'll be the first to point out the lack of credibility with on-off numbers. But I have followed Illinois this season, just with everything going on with Terrence Shannon Jr. off the court. But offensively, they have been better with him off the court, not by a ton. The offensive rating goes from 115 to 121 when he's off the court, but defensively they're much worse. So overall, they're actually a better team with him on the court. But I think what we see is the assist percentage goes up quite a bit when he's not on the floor, and that's because he's a guy who likes to create mismatches and he likes to go ISO, and that's his game, and that's what he's good at doing. But I think that what we see is we definitely see a different product, and that I forget what his season average is. I think it's around 20. Sonny, is that correct so far this season?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so the notion that you remove Terrence Shannon Jr. from the equation, and that's just like a net 20-point loss. Basketball doesn't work that way. So what we saw, with him off the court, we saw guys like Damask really step up and then become like that almost the leading scorer. I mean, in that stretch there, we saw guys like Rutgers, play really well. Luke Goody playing really well. I mean, as a team, I feel like Illinois was harder to defend. Where before it was just having to lock down Terrence Shannon Jr. and that was a good start defensively. At least this is a very talented team across the board. But I think that the anatomy of the team is very different. That there are a lot more avenues when he's not on the court, and he's a guy that, understandably so, wants to try to score. So I think that my definite answer is that it's a very different team, and the numbers do back that up too.
You think we're right, Sonny? What do you think?
I mean, I guess the way you answer the question, is the team not as good right now as it was 2 weeks ago? No, probably not. But does this team need Terrence Shannon to reach its ceiling? Absolutely. Right now, in the 2 weeks or 3 weeks that Shannon was gone, the team learned to play a different, completely different style of play, running the offense through Damask. The other guys stepped up. Right now, it's I feel for the kid. Terrence Shannon, obviously, he's gone through a lot over the past month, and he's got a lot on his mind. The guy is 1 for 14 from 3-point land since he came back. This is a guy who, before he got this incident happened. I'll phrase it very carefully. Was you're talking about All-American, first team, finishing top 3 player of the year. That was that player. The guy now, his legs aren't completely under him. He's thinking too much. What he was doing before he left the team is he'd grab the rebound. He was the best transition player in the country. You give him the ball, he's just got an NBA body where he could put his head down, head straight to the rim, and either he was going to score or he was going to get free throws for you. Right now, that isn't quite there. And I think it's just kind of like a mental sort of thing. I think, Underwood's been very clear that the Big Ten matters, but, winning, he's won a Big Ten title. He's won the Big Ten tournament title. Right now, this season, he's got a bunch of veterans on this team. This team is about performing in March. And he knows that in order to perform in March to make it to Sweet 16 and potentially beyond, he's going to need a Terrence Shannon Jr. to be the alpha type of player. I think the offense is going to continue, and it has continued to run through Damask now. We found the guy. He's kind of like the Scottie Pippen of the Bulls. Sorry, I'm from Chicago. I grew up watching the Bulls. Scottie was like the de facto point guard. Damask, is kind of that de facto point guard who runs the entire offense. Terrence Shannon's the one guy who, again, we're such a good rebounding team. We attack the boards, and then if you can get it to Shannon, he can attack the rim immediately. And as you talked about, get fouls on the other team. It's just a matter of his confidence coming back, his legs coming back. They've only had 3 practices since he's returned, so it's not like they've had a lot of, since they've adjusted their offensive philosophy, they haven't really had time to translate it to the court. So, I mean, it's not something I'm too worried about. I get the concern, but I mean, all you have to do is just look 1 year ago from today. The national champions, UConn. UConn lost 6 out of 8 games at the end of December and January. They went through a stretch where everyone else was writing them off. Right now is kind of the time to figure this out with Terrence. We're 1-1 in our last 2 games, but Northwestern's a pretty good team, and we lost on the road. A lot of teams are losing to Northwestern on the road this year. So, we didn't look that impressive against Indiana here at home, but it's a victory. And, victories in the Big Ten, they got to count for something. So we'll see what happens, Tuesday at Ohio State. I really want to see Terrence have his first, just pre-incident Terrence Shannon game where he scores 25 points. He looks like the guy that he used to look like. And then I think, then our team is in very good shape, for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I think you spoke a lot of truth there. Chris is coming in agreeing. Whoops, there it is. Chris is coming in agreeing that with me that Illinois is better without TSJ than with him. And like I said, for right now, this could be different. And Joe kind of said that there. It's not all about Shannon. The team overall is out of sync, and it's right. Some of this is on Shannon and his efficiency, but also some of it is how the offense changes with him in there and changing back to that, like we talked about. But you're exactly right, Sonny. I don't see this being a long term. This is going to be an issue. You would rather have this happening right now in January than you would in March or at the end of February or something like that, because there's still time to figure it out. Let's hit on Indiana really fast before we get out of here with this one. Indiana, no Khalil Ware. I heard somebody say that Indiana is better without Khalil Ware. I don't see that. I don't see where the defense is without Khalil Ware in there. I don't think anybody on Indiana's team is a highly skilled defender other than Khalil Ware. Malik Renew scores a lot of points, and Mackenzie Mbako is coming into his game a little bit more. But I don't see the defense there without Khalil Ware. Xavier Johnson had a nicer game, but he still did that stupid thing where he threw the ball at Coleman Hawkins' face, which, whatever. Tell Coleman Hawkins to get his hands up, I guess. I don't know. But this Indiana team just doesn't look great right now, and not hitting any 3-pointers is definitely not helping that. You have any thoughts on Indiana, Frank, before we move on?
Just one thing to add to what you said. I mean, I had to look up Khalil Ware's numbers on off, and they are substantially better when he plays. So
yeah,
quantifiably to a certain degree, there's very little merit to that claim. That's all I have to say on that one.
Yeah, what do you think, Sonny?
I'm not sure. Like, how do you not shoot a 3-pointer in an entire game? Like, Indiana's.
Well, they shot 9. They just didn't make it.
Yeah, but even 9, in modern day college basketball, it's just not that many. So it's one of those where, I had Burke White from the Often Daunted podcast, also Big Banter podcast, on our show, and he was telling me he was the most optimistic Indiana fan. And if you listen to that show, you wanted to just shed a tear for the guy. And I have, they're in a rut right now. And, there's nothing that I saw necessarily on Saturday that I would be too optimistic about. Like, just the roster balance on that team. doesn't make sense for Mike Woodson, the guy who's now in his third year. Like, he should have the roster built a little bit better.
Well, they just don't have anybody to replace Trace. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Trace was so much more important to this team than people. Trace Jackson Davis, that being, was so much more important to this team than people I think realize. For Xavier Johnson to be as good as he is, for the center to be able to be as good as he is, and at the end of the day, without Trace, they're looking for identity and they're looking for who they're going to be. So kind of a sad state of affairs for IU, but I know our Purdue friends in the chat are not too sad for them, so they're okay with it. All right, let's move on to our next one. Here we go. We'll talk about our Purdue friends this time. Purdue 68, Rutgers 60. This game looked like it was pretty well in hand. Things were going well for the Boilermakers, and then Rutgers just kind of got back into the game. They made a really nice run and kind of put a little bit of fear, I think, into the Boilermakers. But I mean, this is what one of the best teams in the Big Ten will do. They let the run happen, but they don't get too caught up in it, and they go against the run and basically just shut the team down and still win the game. Your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, I was never comfortable. Purdue could have been up 30, and I still wouldn't have been okay with that. I've had my heart broken too many times watching games at the rack. But to start off, it's a pretty cool thing for Purdue seniors to have won in every Big Ten stadium, and like going forward, I don't know how possible that'll be to happen again. With the Big Ten expanding, but that's just a really cool thing. It was cool to see Zach Edey get 2,000 points, and then I sit and think, like, man, when did he score 2,000 points? I mean, it's just crazy. But honestly, I thought Rutgers did a good job defending him. He did go 9 for 12 and had 26 points, but there were a lot of shots that he didn't take and a lot of questionable passes that were led to some pretty good rotations and whatnot. So there was a lot of things that didn't happen as a result of the defense. And he did have 26, but that's you kind of expect that to a certain degree. So shout out to Big Cliff doing a really good job on there. But honestly, if you would have told me before the game that Purdue would have 21% turnover percentage in the game, I think it was 15 total turnovers. Rutgers would have 37% offensive rebounding percentage compared to Purdue's 22. Purdue would shoot 26% from three. I would have thought, like, okay, that's a 10-point loss. And really, Purdue just made up for it on the defensive end, I thought. Lance Jones, he only had 4 points in the game, but he did have 8 assists, 10 rebounds, and 5 steals. And it was the timeliness of the steals that I thought was pretty impressive, in my opinion. It was like every time Rutgers would start to go on a run, like, boom, there he was. Like, he'd swipe the ball out of someone's hands. He'd jump a passing lane. A couple times he got easy layups out of it. It wasn't his best offensive game, but he did everything he needed to do to win. And then, just the performance offensively from Braden Smith, he's kind of taken a distributor role lately, but he really picked up the scoring in this game. It was really nice to see. But it was really the first game this season where I could visually see the press giving Purdue some problems, and that, like, yeah, we did have a couple turnovers against the press, but they'd get it across half court and then they'd be limited on time. And that really seemed to give Purdue problems offensively, and they were trying to run these long drawn out sets, and they were trying to do so with 18, 19 seconds left on the clock. But just a grinder of a game, not one that I ever felt comfortable. Like I said, we could have been up 30 and I still would have been frightened, but happy to see Purdue get the win. Happy to see the seniors finally get that notch in their belt they've been looking to get their entire career, and just on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, Rutgers is always going to be a tough defensive team for anybody to face just because of their length. I mean, their shortest guy is Simpson at 6'3", 6'2", or something like that, and every other guy is like 6'6" or bigger. There might be Williams. I don't know if he's 6'6". He might be 6'5". But anyway, I mean they're just a super long team, and they're going to give teams fits. So I would say if Rutgers is making you struggle against the press, that's not like the worst thing in the world. Like, that's kind of Rutgers' game right now, is really hard defense and get teams to struggle just because of their length more than anything else, and their effort as well. Sonny, your thoughts on the game?
You just kind of saw the best of Purdue. Purdue is the best team in the conference, arguably in the country. And yeah, Rutgers did, get it a little close, but the RAC is just a hard place to play, and Purdue knows it, and Illinois knows it too. We kind of broke our own streak of losing there for a few years in a row earlier this year with I think it was an 18-20 point win. It's just a hard place to play. I still think their coach is one of the better coaches in the conference. As you talked about, one of the top 10, 15 defenses in the country. It's Purdue's just one of those teams where, I'm glad Frank mentioned it. They seemed a little confused for a little bit once they started instituting a press. From what I've seen of Purdue's a team that they game plan. Matt Painter's, one of the best coaches in the country. They know what you're going to do, and they're going to stop it. But if you try something different on them, sometimes it takes them a while to adjust and to figure things out. And that's kind of what we saw a glimpse of in the Illinois game in the second half. And also you've got a glimpse of it with Rutgers. So any team who's trying to take on Purdue, they know what you do best. What you do best doesn't matter because Purdue is better than you. So they're going to stop it. But if you can find a wrinkle for 40 minutes, then, you might be able to find a way to win.
Well, and everybody's going to go in deep on the press against Purdue because guess what? That's the only part of the court that Zach Edey doesn't touch the ball on. And Zach Edey is going to beat every single team he faces. I mean, there is not a team in the country who, unless the refs are just horrible that game, that is going to stop Zach Edey. And so if you can get pressure on the ball. Braden Smith is much improved this year, but he's still not perfect. If you can get some kind of pressure on the ball before the ball gets down the court to get to Zach Edey, I mean, that has to be the game plan. I don't think anybody wants to go in a matchup, at the half court with Braden Smith and Zach Edey and pick and roll together. Because guess what? You step an inch toward Braden Smith and it's going to be a lob over your head. Zach Edey gets position and he's just going to bully you down low and he's going to hit a hook shot or something else. I mean, the man is unstoppable, and you have to try and do something to beat Purdue when Zach Edey's not a factor, because as soon as Zach Edey's a factor, you've already lost. I mean, that's just the way it is. So yeah.
One thing, Sonny, one thing, Sonny, I would like to add is that I do agree in that, like, Purdue, like, once they settle into a rhythm, if you can disrupt that rhythm, it definitely has given them problems this season. And I think which is one thing to, like, caveat that with is that Matt Painter's talked about, like, you can watch teams on film defensively and get a feel for what they do, but you never know how they're going to defend Zach. That, like, a lot of teams are forced to post trap when they necessarily aren't a post trapping team. So, like, oftentimes, like, watching film defensively can be a little confusing because you don't actually know what's going to happen when they get into the game, because you can't simulate a 7'4" guy in practice if you don't have one. They're not just, like, out there roaming around. So that's why sometimes Purdue's a little slow to settle into a game, and once they hit a rhythm, they're usually good, so long as teams don't, switch things up. Maryland did a decent job of switching up defensively, but Purdue was just able to capitalize on it. And I think there's a little bit of a difference athletically between Rutgers and Maryland right now, but we'll get to Maryland.
Yeah, we'll get to them soon. Sonny, you got any more thoughts before we move on from this one?
No, not really. Purdue's a very good basketball team, and just for the record, I don't get along with many Purdue fans, but me and the Boiler Express guys, we're good. All of you. I see you guys in the comments. We're all good.
I was going to say, before we move on, if you guys ever are feeling down about yourself, just get on a live stream and have Dylan commenting, hyping up Frank, of course, but Sonny also looking handsome.
Thank you, sir.
Great head of hair on that guy. I'm jealous. So there we go. Dylan, nice guy Dylan there. Let's see. Moving on to Michigan State and Wisconsin. Wisconsin wins this one 81-66. Friday night, it was not a good situation in the Kohl Center. The other day on the podcast, we kept calling it the Kohl Center. It is the Kohl Center for Wisconsin, and Wisconsin just kind of had their way in this one. Izzo kind of looked out of sorts. I don't know what in the world he's thinking playing two bigs. Tom Izzo, the strength of your team is not the front court, so, maybe don't play two of them at one time. Xavier Booker looked good. Kohler looked good on offense, but this is still a team searching for some front court identity, while Wisconsin is just literally firing on all cylinders right now. You have any type of weakness in your game, and it seems like Wisconsin can exploit that in some way, shape, or form. And AJ Storr is starting his campaign to be the backup player of the conference behind Zach Edey. So, I mean, that's the race right now, right? It's not who's the player of the conference. Zach Edey is going to be it, but who's going to be behind him? And AJ Storr's making a good a good run for that because he's just playing at a really high level right now. Frank, I'm curious your thoughts on the Wisconsin-Michigan State game.
I mean, it's hard to talk about this game and not just immediately go to AJ Storr, man. Just what a performance. 28 points, 68% true shooting, scoring at all three levels. 6 for 9 from 2, 3 from 8 from 3. Not the best numbers from 3, but 7 for 8 at the line. I mean, but honestly, on paper, this game came down to rebounding, in my opinion. Michigan State only rebounded 58% of Wisconsin's missed shots. That's not great. That's not going to win you games. You want to see that number around 75% or higher. But I think it's been an adjustment for me this season, and that this isn't your run-of-the-mill typical Wisconsin team. Where you've got two big set an elevator screen for one shooter and something like that. I mean, they're getting out in transition. They're attacking guys off the dribble. I mean, this is a fun team. In a previous life, we did weekly power rankings, and another member of the podcast and I did shows, and people thought we were crazy earlier in the season when we put Wisconsin at number 2 early in the season. But there's who's laughing now, right? I just think that Wisconsin had their way in this game. They had a 133 offensive rating against the Michigan State team that going into the game was a top 20 KenPom defense team. I mean, they are good, but they got out to an early lead. Michigan State kept it close there for a little while, and they just stretched it out and never looked back. And I think I'm not being too crazy here when I say that Michigan State is probably a bubble team. I mean, if not erring on the side of maybe not making the tournament right now. I mean, and they've just got some personnel issues to figure out. I mean, like I said, they're playing multiple bigs. Tom Izzo's under a lot of heat right now. It's last time I was on, you asked if it was panic time for Michigan State, and at the time I said no, but it's past panic time at this point. But it was just a fun game. It was fun to watch Wisconsin just kind of have their way. I honestly didn't expect it. I thought Michigan State would make some adjustments, having already played them once, but it just didn't go that way, unfortunately, for them.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State's in a position right now where they really Net still likes them. KenPom still likes them, so they obviously have that. I feel like if they are a bubble team, the committee's just going to go ahead and put them in because it's Tom Izzo. It's the, what the record of tournaments made and all that stuff. So they're going to get the benefit of the doubt if they're right there, but they have to be right there. And if they keep losing at these point differentials, then they're not going to be there. Before the show started, we talked about the importance of point differentials, or what we think is the importance of point differentials in some of these ratings. And this is not 81 to 66. It's not the worst loss in the world. We're going to talk about a team who lost by a lot more later on. But still, it's not going to help Michigan State if they are losing all of these big games. I mean, quad 1 games, 2-7. Give them credit; they're playing a lot of quad 1 games. But look at it, Wisconsin has played the same number, and they're 6-3. So, I mean, you can say, oh, well, we've played a lot of hard games, but there's a lot of teams out there who have actually won their hard games, and Michigan State hasn't. So, Sonny, your thoughts on Wisconsin and Michigan State?
It's two teams that just play on a completely opposite wavelength. Michigan State, you never really know which Michigan State's going to show up. They started off the season struggling. Then they went on a run where you kind of thought things may be turning around for them. And then they were completely overmatched in that game against Wisconsin. In my opinion, Wisconsin's got the second highest floor in the Big Ten. They know what they do. They play typical Wisconsin ball. And I had Rajiv from Bucky Report, who I know is a guest here frequently. He talked about how, Wisconsin's still Wisconsin. What they've always lacked is an athlete. And that's what AJ Storr has essentially brought in. Now, Illini fans who are watching this, they're familiar with Storr because he was a one-time Illini commit. As you mentioned, he's just gotten better every single year. He's a guy I paid attention to in St. John's just because of his initial commitment to Illinois. He's a fantastic player who is just raising the ceiling of what Wisconsin Badger you kind of perceive it to be. Normally it was just a bunch of good fundamental guys, and the team itself would outperform the pieces. The whole was larger than the pieces. This year, the pieces are pretty dang good too.
Sorry, I was muted there. The pieces are great, and I think one of the biggest pieces of it, or the biggest piece of it that is kind of changing the Wisconsin basketball is Tyler Wall. I mean, he's not playing that, secondary big role like Frank was talking about, where he, is only that secondary big. He's playing the role in a different way. And John Blackwell has been a tremendous piece to this team as well. This freshman John Blackwell, I don't think Wisconsin is the team they are if they don't have John Blackwell, because this was supposed to be a similar, not the same kind, but a similar player to who Connor Essegian was supposed to be. And Connor's just not been that guy this season. But John Blackwell, the freshman, true freshman, has stepped in and able to fill a role as kind of the sixth man. I don't have the minutes numbers in front of me, but to me, he's their sixth man, making that kind of impact for this team. So AJ Storr, like you said, he's an athletic piece that they needed, and it's crazy how one player can seem to change the entire team just by them adding them. And the nicest part about Wisconsin, it doesn't have to be AJ Storr. It can be Max Klesmit. Max Klesmit had a run earlier in the season. It can be Steven Crowl. I mean, it can be all of these guys. And Chucky Hepburn is just the consistent point guard that you need on the defensive end and on the offensive end to make these kind of things happen. So, Frank, looks like Wisconsin's going to give you guys a run for your money possibly in the Big Ten. I wouldn't have predicted that. I thought Wisconsin would be a good team. But at the end of the day, I mean, how concerned are you that Wisconsin could win the Big Ten?
I mean, I think it's very likely. I think, from this point forward, scheduling favors Purdue just a little bit more. Yeah. Not by a lot, but just a little bit more. And that, these two teams have yet to meet, assuming that the Big Ten race is Purdue and Wisconsin, which right now it's a fairly safe assumption to say that's probably the case. But they've yet to meet, they've yet to play. I think that'll determine a lot, this next game between Purdue and Wisconsin. But I'm I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of 10 is like, I think Wisconsin's going to win it, and 0 means Purdue's definitely got it. I would put it at probably a 6 right now. Like I said, the scheduling TBD, but that's the main factor that I think Purdue has going for them. It's just a little bit more favorable schedule.
Well, if Purdue wins both of their games, because they play Wisconsin twice, and one of them is the last game of the season, so that very well could decide it. What are your thoughts, Sonny?
That last week is interesting because our Illinois' third last game of the season is at Wisconsin. Then they play at home senior night against Purdue. And then the last game of the season is against Iowa. So, I mean, if things are close, everything could come down to that final week in the Big Ten, which should be pretty exciting. No, also, real quick, any Illini fans watching this, make sure you clip the last minute and a half of this episode of them talking about it being a Purdue and Wisconsin race. We'll see what happens by the end.
Please. I love being proven wrong. So yes, please do. Please, I welcome it. Yeah.
I was going to mention at the end here, don't count Illinois out. Okay, so there's definitely a possibility there. But at the end of the day, you got 8-1 Wisconsin, 8-2 Purdue in the conference, and Illinois at 6-3, so they're right there. But they definitely need a little bit to turn in their favor. But if you told me Illinois is going to win out, or maybe just win or lose 1 or 2 more games in the conference, I could see it happening. So Illinois is going to be right there as well. It's going to be a fun race to see until the end. All right, let's move on. Oh, before we do that, I do want to remind you, CBB Analytics does give me a free pro tier to tell you about them. So please go check out CBB Analytics. They have all kinds of resources, free resources, paid resources, all kinds of things like that. I know Stat Tank Frank over here loves CBB Analytics as well. They give you guys a pro tier, or I don't know, pro tier as well. So very cool stuff over at CBB Analytics. Makes you a better basketball fan to be able to study that stuff. So go check them out. All right, let's talk about Maryland taking down Nebraska. This was Nebraska on the road. So I would like to see power rankings where Nebraska at home is there, and then Nebraska on the road is there as well, because it's just 2 completely different teams. Still credit to Maryland. Maryland played very well. It wasn't just the Jameer Young show on offense. Julian Reese was doing a lot on offense as well. Dante Scott was filling in and making some large contributions as well. So, and this is what you want out of a Maryland team, for it not just to be all Jameer Young on offense. And when you have that happen, you have some pretty special things happen, because the defense is there for Maryland this season. They're able to make things happen, and they're able to be more than just this offensive team. And Maryland just they happen to be one of the better defensive teams in the Big Ten. Sonny, what were your thoughts on Maryland's win over Nebraska?
You know, a lot of people forget Maryland was, I think they finished third in the preseason Big Ten, order that the media day. They finished third. You know, that's a talented team out there. Obviously, they stumbled coming out of the block, but you can kind of see them rounding into shape. You can see like all the quality players that they have. Julian Reese is an absolute stud. You know, Illinois saw that, point blank. And Nebraska is just kind of Nebraska. It's almost like a fun story to watch, because on one hand, they're the up and comer, like, Fred Hoiberg, getting these guys, will they not make the NCAA tournament? And at home, they look like world beaters. And then just on the road, you have no idea who they could lose to and by how many points. So, I mean, really, these are two good teams who I don't know, you guys might have the stats in front of me more, like whether Maryland can actually continue making this turnaround to become one of the teams in the Big Ten that can make a bid. But if they play to what their ceiling, the perception was at the beginning in preseason, I think they're a really good team.
Yeah, I think that the problems are some of their early losses in the season, quad 3 losses, I believe. That makes that really hard for them to overcome. I definitely think they can overcome it. They still have a chance to make the tournament, but they're going to have to play some really good basketball down the stretch in order to do that, and not just win games at home, but also win some pretty tough games on the road as well. Frank, what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have seen a turnaround from Maryland in this last month. It's been pretty interesting to watch. I mean, in this game in particular, I think that Nebraska's first scoring play, they say they have they run a Chicago action for K-State Tominaga, and he just gets a wide open shot off of it, and Maryland's chasing it. I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, it's just going to be another one of these games where they're just going to have their way offensively. And that's not how the rest of the game went. I mean, they did get out to their early lead. 5 minutes in, it's 12-2 Nebraska, and then Maryland. I mean, offensively, we saw in a performance, I don't think we've seen anything close to matching that. Jamie Kaiser Jr., like 4 for 5 from 3 in the game, and honestly, like 3 of those were bad shots. He was 22% on the season coming into the game, but I think like a lot of these games we talked about tonight, it was more of just Nebraska having an off night. They turned the ball over quite a bit. 27% turnover percentage. Their season average is 14. They only had 3 offensive rebounds in the game as well. So if you're turning the ball over and you're not getting up shots, it's hard to win games. But really the big thing is, just offensively, Nebraska went away, 83 offensive rating. We see them around the 115 mark on the season. Tominaga wasn't hitting shots. It's just going to be a hard path on the road from here on out. And JR, I know you've asked the question, will they win a road game? I know you don't want to hear this, but I think Ohio State's kind of the only opportunity left for them. But the scoring distribution for Maryland, I mean, you have Reese with 15, Kaiser with 14, Jameer Young with 12, Jahari Long with 11, Harris Smith with 9, Dante Scott with 9. I mean, who do you guard? Who do you pick up there? So it's not only that, 25 points off their bench too, when they only average 12 on the season. Like that's just a tough thing to overcome if you're in Nebraska. But I'm not concerned. I still think they have a good chance to get into the big dance. I think they've got just a really talented team, a really diverse team in terms of how they look to score, and I think that they'll bounce right back. Because Sonny said at home, they look like they can beat anybody.
Yeah, if the season plays out the way I think it will, they'll get their only road win. Well, not their only road win, but their only road win in the conference at Ohio State, and then lose to Michigan at Michigan. So that'll be fun. But no, yeah, I think Nebraska definitely just a completely different team on the road playing against any type of good competition, and that's really, really hard for them to overcome. And give credit to those Nebraska fans. I mean, they are rabid in the arena. I don't know how many games you guys have watched in Lincoln or anything like that, but I there are some games that I watch where I'm like, I need to go to that arena. The Illinois Northwestern game was one that made me like, I need to go to a Northwestern game at some point. And almost every single game I watch in Nebraska, I'm like, I have to go out to that arena at some point when Illinois is doing well because those fans are rabid, and it just looks like a great environment. Sonny, do you have some thoughts?
I mean, the Huskers, it seems like it doesn't matter what sport they're playing. In Lincoln, they're just rabid about their university.
Yeah, they are. Um, all right, I don't really have any more thoughts here, so unless you guys do, we can move on to the next part. We do have a question here from Jeffrey. I think this is for me and you. He's an Illinois fan, Frank. So I want to know what Frank and JR think separately. What are Illinois' biggest flaws, and what would they do differently if they were coaching Illinois against their teams? I'll take this first, and then you can go, Frank. I think that one of Illinois' biggest flaws right now is just reintegrating Terrence Shannon Jr. I think that it's really, really hard when you're switching as much on defense as they are for Coleman Hawkins to make the defensive presence down low that he needs to make, because not really anybody else has the size that he does. And let's just be honest here, Danger he does not make a difference on defense. He's a good offensive player, but he is not a defensive difference maker. And so really Coleman Hawkins is that guy. And I saw somebody in the chat earlier say something like, if Coleman Hawkins is defensive player of the year, why do all of his matchups, have good stat games? And it's like, okay, I see what you're saying, but also you have to understand how Illinois plays defense. There's a lot of switching, and they almost always switch, and so it's not uncommon to find Coleman Hawkins on a point guard, and he really doesn't do a bad job when he's on that point guard. So, no, I think the biggest issue right now is just reintegrating Terrence Shannon Jr. into the offense, making sure he's efficient, and trying to get Domask that role as kind of the ball handler, distributor, because I think he is better at that than maybe we thought, at least I thought, at the beginning of this season. Frank, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not so much a flaw. It's just something that could potentially trip them up, I think, is just the way they seek to generate a lot of offense, and that's through creating mismatches on switches and then looking to attack those, and they do have the athletes to do that. They have really five guys who, to use the overused phrase, have that dog in them, right? We've seen it from Guerrier. We've seen it from Terrence Shannon Jr. He's elite. Coleman Hawkins can put the team on his back. Domask did in the absence of Shannon. I just wonder, come postseason, with a team like let's say Houston, who just looks like they can defend anyone one-on-one, how the offense can adjust. I'm not saying it won't. I'd just be curious to see, do you start running some stagger screens, for example, to get guys open threes, and you kind of get away from this iso-centric, spot up centric style offense, which kudos to them for being able to do it. That's just, I'm not even saying it's a flaw. It's just a question I would have, and I'm sure Underwood's got some tricks up his sleeve if that does come.
Yeah, and I think Underwood is gonna outcoach a lot of coaches out there. There are obviously very good coaches in the Big Ten, but there's a lot of there are some coaches in the Big Ten. He just eats their lunch every time I think he faces them. So, all right. Thanks for the question, Jeffrey. Appreciate that. Let's move on to the next one. I don't really want to talk about this game. It's okay, but also at the same time, I am getting a little bit of enjoyment by just talking about how bad my team is, because maybe they'll stop being bad. I don't know. I'm going through some emotions, but I know this isn't the Ohio State show, so, let's make sure we talk about Northwestern as well. Frank, Ohio State has not won a single road game since New Year's Day of last year, and it was against Northwestern, and Northwestern just completely destroyed Ohio State in this one. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we talked about Nebraska at home versus on the road being kind of two different teams. And I think we're kind of seeing that with Northwestern too. I mean, they definitely have a baseline offense, and then they've just exploded a few times this season. Once against Purdue, they did a pretty good job against Illinois. They did a pretty good job against Michigan State, and then here against Ohio State. And as we talked about before we went live, I watching this game kind of in the peripheral as it was on, I just felt like Northwestern was just having their way. They were, Ohio State wasn't executing. And, I went back and watched the condensed version today, and it just felt like Ohio State had some good shots that didn't go in. Northwestern had some good and also some questionable shots that just happened to go in. But when Boo Buie gets going, man, like he just needs a little bit of just a little bit of a warm up, and he's gone. Like he is such top 3 guard in the conference, in my opinion, just in terms of isolation and being able to get a bucket when you need one. But yeah, I know a lot of Ohio State fans, at least from what I saw on Twitter last night, were ready to hop off the Holtmann train, ready to kick him to the curb. And I'm not saying it's not there, but I'm not saying it's there. It's at that point. But I think 25 of Ohio State's 58 points came from the line, and just overall, you just can't have a whole bunch of guys have really inefficient nights. Thornton goes 3 for 9 from the floor. Battle goes 1 for 6. You don't see that from him typically. Now, if he makes 2 more of those, that doesn't really change the outcome of the game. But you couple that with the guys around him just having inefficient nights, and things are going to go well. Ultimately, Ohio State was 34% from the floor. Northwestern is 57% from the floor. I mean, that's just a recipe for a blowout loss. Northwestern has 6 guys in double figures too, which is just a hard thing to overcome. But like I said, I'm not ready to give up on Ohio State yet. I know a lot of Ohio State fans seem to be there if what I saw on Twitter is representative of the fan base as a whole, but I'm still feeling good. Ohio State's got a really talented team. In my opinion, they have a pretty good coach, and I just think that they just caught Northwestern on a bad night for Ohio State.
Yeah, and the problem is that, like, if this was one performance where Ohio State was shooting bad, I would say, no harm, no foul. Not everybody has their nights. Move on from there. But ever since IU, it's been bad shooting performances, and that's something that you have to eventually fix if you're the coach. And I've said my opinion here on Chris Holtmann so many times, and I'll say it again if there is anybody who hasn't heard it. I think Chris Holtmann is a fantastic human being. I think he is a high character individual, and I'm proud to have him as the coach of my basketball team when the basketball team is doing well. It's unfortunate, but the team does not look confident. The team quit at one point during that game, and for me, that's really, really difficult to watch. And so, yes, last night I was in my emotions a little bit going through it. But, I mean, I think any of us could say if you watched your team literally just give up at some point, you'd be frustrated too. And I'm not so much frustrated at those players because I get it, but it's just frustrating to see. Not saying I dislike the players, it's just frustrating to see. And unfortunately, I don't know how Chris Holtmann fixes it, and unfortunately, based off what he said after the game, I don't think he knows how to fix it either. And that's something where it's like almost for like Ohio State's sake, but because I love Chris Holtmann so much, for his sake as well, I almost want him to leave just so that way his stock is high enough that he can get another head coaching job someplace else, because I do think he's a good coach. I just don't think it's working right now. And I think that, unfortunately, unless he makes it to the Final Four this year, I think Ohio State fans are just out on him for good. And like I said, that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So, yeah, Sonny, your thoughts on the game?
We also have to keep in mind that, Ohio State has a very, big and energetic fan base. And there was a lot of negative energy, a lot of angry folks after Michigan won that national title. Now the football team has had the offseason of the ages,
Right.
grabbing every stud there is. So that negative energy has to go somewhere. And poor Chris Holtmann, he's getting the brunt of it right now. But not that I disagree with anything you're saying. Like you said, the team just looks very confused, discombobulated. Like, I agree. I think Holtmann's a good coach, but even sometimes good coaches just don't do a good coaching job. And this just might be an instance where it's kind of best for both parties to just kind of have a clean slate, start, try something fresh in, 2 different environments. But, I also want to give credit to Northwestern. I know they're a rival of ours, but Northwestern, look at the panel. Like, they've beaten both of our teams, all 3 of our teams, essentially at home now. Boo Buie, I agree with you when you say, he arguably a top 3 guard in the conference, but I genuinely think, I don't know if there's a player I would rather have at the end of a game than Boo Buie. And I kind of mentioned that in the Northwestern preview as well. I was like, we need to create some distance between Illinois and Northwestern, because if Boo Buie and Northwestern is, within a couple baskets of you, he can take control of the game. No matter who you have on the floor, he has the capability of being the best player on the court at that time. Illinois saw it a couple days ago. Ohio State didn't really have to see it. There was a little bit more cushion on Northwestern side there, but again, you just got to give credit to Northwestern. They're going to be a tournament team this year, and they're just a very hard team to play at their arena.
Yeah, and that's the part I don't want it to get lost in, because almost every time we do an Ohio State recap, it turns into JR's emotional time, and that's fine. I'll put my emotions on the stream. I don't really care. You can call me emotional. I don't care. I like my team. Sue me. But I do think we also need to talk about Northwestern, like you guys pointed out. This is a very good team at home, and Boo Buie is probably the second or third best player in this conference. There's a couple other guys that are vying for that second spot as well, but I think Boo Buie is at least second or third here. And I was kind of down on Boo Buie earlier in the year because I said he just wasn't consistent enough in some areas. But he's been consistent lately, and he's looked really, really good doing it. So and some of it too. Also, as I watch Northwestern more, I realize this. Some of it too is not always Boo Buie, and I'm not trying to disparage the team, but sometimes it's the teammates around him as well that are not performing to give him some of the numbers that you would like to see to make him look better. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. We have a few comments here, so I'm gonna roll through these. 49ers won, good game. Yes, I saw that. I know everybody likes the Lions story, but I don't like anything up north, so I'm good with that. Jeffrey said what Frank hit on was the biggest concern, and I think he's dead on, but thanks for answering, fellas. Just want an outside perspective. You're welcome. That's what this whole podcast is about, outside perspective of all kinds of Big Ten teams. Fisherman, good evening. Holtmann buyout is $14 million, though. Yes, Fisherman, you were the one in the comments last time talking with us about Holtmann. That'll be
money doesn't matter with Ohio State. We've learned that this offseason. Your coffers are full.
And if you have been following Ohio State as closely as I have, the Texas A&M AD is the one coming in to replace Gene Smith, and he just fired, who was it, Jimbo Fisher for what, like $70 million? So he looks at $14 million, he's like, chump change. Jeffrey again, actually you both right. JR, hey, thanks, hit on the defensive concerns. I also share, yes. And Russ being Mr. Perspective for me here. I appreciate that. Good news for Ohio State is at least 3 of the 4 new teams next year will likely slide right into the Big Ten basement, which raises Ohio State's floor. Yes, thank you. That's what I need. I need to keep adding worse teams to the conference to make my team seem a little bit better, but we'll just remain stagnant there. I'm fine with that.
JR, can I ask one question about this game?
Go ahead.
So Ohio State shot 33 free throws. Northwestern shot 17. And I feel like Purdue fans all season have just been hearing about these conspiracy theories, right? Every time there's a big gap in the number of free throws teams shoot, it's a refereeing conspiracy theories. It's guys getting away with fouls and stuff. So I just think that I'm asking, where's the Ohio State conspiracy theory? Because we should at least be consistent, Anytime one team doubles up the other in free throw attempts, I mean, there's got to be something wrong systematically, I think. So I'll be waiting for that one.
No, what happened was Ohio State had some leftover NIL money, and they actually paid the refs to try and help them win the game. And unfortunately, even when you pay the refs, you can still lose by 25. Yeah, so there's your answer, Frank. All right, I don't think we have any more thoughts here. So does does that mean Buzz Williams is coming? Oh, I hope not. I don't really want Buzz Williams, but at this point, I'd take anybody, I guess. Am I crazy for wanting Sean Miller? Is that crazy? Mr. FBI guy?
I think there are some better guys. There's some better coaches you could get. He wouldn't be a bad pick, but I think they're like, you should go for like Jerome Tang, maybe Jerome Tang would jump ship.
Yeah. I mean, you have that Big Ten money coming in. It's just who's the guy at Arizona now?
Tommy Lloyd. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, as Rush just said in the comments, Dusty'd
Yeah.
be a good one, honestly. And I
feel
mean,
like he's IU bound.
he's getting a lot of money right now, but money's no obstacle for Ohio State. That'd be a really good one. Not that Sean Miller is a bad one, but I think that he's maybe like a third or fourth option if Ohio State has their way.
I got into an
Not that
argument.
it's
I wouldn't even call it an argument. A disagreement with somebody on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, about Eric Musselman. Do you guys feel like Eric Musselman would lead Arkansas for Ohio State?
I mean, the SEC is really not. I mean, it's really top heavy every year. I think there's a chance if the price was right. I do. He's kind of a weirdo, though. He's kind of a weirdo. I don't know. And see, we got some comments coming in backing me up on Jerome Tang. There we go. But yeah, I wouldn't want Musselman coaching if I were like for my school personally. He's just kind of a weird guy.
Well, I'll just tell you, if we could get Ryan Day calling out the media after his games, the 80-year-old media after his games, and then Eric Musselman taking off his shirt after Ohio State game, I am all for that. That's going to be post-game pandemania over at Ohio State if you have those.
One more name I'll add is, and this is actually semi-feasible, is Chris Beard too. He's having a really good season too. So go get Shaka. He likes playing Big Ten teams already in the comments. There you go. Yeah. That'd be another good get.
I didn't follow much with Chris Beard after the whole situation at Texas. Was he charged for that or what?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't, but he was dismissed as the coach, and he's at Ole Miss, and I think he's at Ole Miss, and he's doing pretty well down there. So
okay.
I just think that I think that's Ohio State's definitely a better destination between the two, but I'm not sure if they're still ranked. He's had them ranked though this season, and he had a lot of good transfers. So he's another guy that upset Purdue back in 2015 with Little Rock, and Purdue kind of springboarded his career, just like we kind of did with Tobin Anderson. So you get Tobin Anderson too. That's another great, from Iona now. Yeah.
If there's anybody that can just come in and face off with Purdue a little bit, and give me and Frank some rivalry banter, that'd be nice. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. We talked a lot about Ohio State. Minnesota beats Penn State in this one, 83-74. I thought Penn State was going to win this game. Penn State was at home, but Minnesota fought, and they had some good contributions. Cam Christie had a good game in this one, and he was able to help the Golden Gophers get this win here. I think the Golden Gophers are having a nice season. I don't really think there's an avenue for them to get to the tournament. I mean, obviously, if they win out or something, that could happen, but just not enough hard games. Penn State is still kind of finding themselves. They have their good games. They have their bad games. They lost to Ohio State, so after we just talked about Ohio State, that kind of leads you to where they are there. But Frank, did you have any thoughts on this game, or just thoughts about these two teams overall?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just the two teams overall. I mean, the future for Penn State looks really good. I mean, Clary's playing out of his mind. He's still young. He's still got a few more years left, and that's scary for the rest of the Big Ten. And we're in this era right now. I don't know if it's the COVID year, finally, popping up. I don't know if it's the transfer portal, but it seems like we're in this era where freshmen are making the most minimal impact that I can ever remember. And you can look across the Big Ten. You can think about some teams that were supposed to have some huge freshmen that were supposed to come in and be big impact players. Indiana comes to mind. Michigan State comes to mind. Even Purdue, honestly. And we really haven't seen them materialize, but Cam Christie has become one of the guys you have to stop for Minnesota. And I respect that. I respect that in this era where freshmen aren't really having as big of an impact as what we've seen in the past. I mean, him and Dawson Garcia took over the second half of this game. And I understand that Mike Mitchell was involved in some scoring too, but Cam Christie's ability to spread out and stretch that defense, he did only go 1 for 5 from 3, but finished, with 19. He hit clutch free throws at the end of the game to ice it. He also scares me. It's just another young guard in this conference, and we've seen what his brother did and is currently doing, in the NBA. So I'm really, really excited for the future of this Minnesota team as well as this Penn State team. Feels like Dawson Garcia has been in college for 10 years. I'm not really sure how he still has a couple years of eligibility left, but the big story of this game was obviously Penn State blowing the 16-point lead. I think it was a 15-0 run that spanned the end of the first half and into the beginning of the second half, and then just Minnesota clawed right back in and never looked back. Yeah, that's really the main thoughts I had on this game. Really entertaining game. I thought Penn State would get another win. I'm always cheering for the underdogs in these type of games, but this is a really good Minnesota team, and I think another tournament team we have here in the conference.
I do need to point out one stat line, and I'm not trying to disparage this player, but he did destroy Ohio State, so I wish he played like this against Ohio State. Leo O'Boyle, you would know him if you've watched this Penn State team, who he is. In 16 minutes, 0 points, 1 shot. It was a 3-pointer. He did not make it. 1 offensive rebound, 1 defensive rebound, and he fouled out.
Very petty, JR.
He iced that game against Ohio State too. Last time I was on, we talked about that, and the O'Boyle rules, I think, was the joke that was made. But yeah, the other gentleman who was on is like, who is Leo O'Boyle? I've never even heard of him before. But yeah, he did not have a great game for sure. He's been like a sine wave this season. He's been up and down.
He's like their 5-man when they go small ball, which no, I think Leo Boyle is fun to watch. I have nothing against him. It was just a crazy stat line that I saw and I wanted to reference because not too many times do you see something like that happen. Sonny, what were your thoughts on either the game or just the two teams individually?
I guess my overall thought is I hope Ben Johnson really gets a chance to really build a roster of his players. I really think he's one of the top up and coming coaches in the conference. You can tell he's a younger guy. He'll kind of throw something that's not traditional out on the court because he knows he doesn't have the players to compete with the other team night in and night out. So they're a team that I'd like to pay attention to just because I like Ben. I think he's a good coach, and if he can get his guys in, I think he'll be moving on to a better job at some point.
Oh, and the hard part with Ben Johnson in Minnesota is they're not like a transfer destination, right? Wisconsin brought back a lot of this good talent, so a guy like AJ Storr going there made sense. There's a number of other guys that they can get somebody because it makes more sense. What's Russ saying here? I saw Russ comment and then Frank laugh. So Ben Johnson to Ohio State from Sunburst.
It was his previous comment that made me laugh.
Oh, his previous Indiana thought Mbaku was a Mexican pizza, but he's a bit more of a cheesy roll. And I see what you're doing with the legal situation there at Taco Bell. Oh, Russ. Yeah, no, but I think that Minnesota, Elijah Hawkins fouling out in this game, that's hard for them, but the guy still had 5 assists in this one. I don't think Elijah Hawkins gets talked about enough for how well of a distributor he is and just how well the team is playing around him on that end to help him be who he is. I mean, the guy leads the nation, at least last time I checked, led the nation in assists per game, which is outstanding. That number one, it's from a Big Ten player, and number 2, it's from Minnesota. So just really, really cool to see him doing that. But you guys are both right. These are two teams that are just kind of on the rise, and we'll see where they go from here. But I think both of these teams have found their coach, at least for the next few years, and going from there. So any other thoughts on these guys before we move on?
He does lead the country still, 7.7 assists per game. I didn't realize that. That's really impressive.
Yeah. And Braden Smith I think there's 5 players that average more than 7 assists per game, and him and Braden Smith are the only 2 in the Big Ten. I think that's what I saw. If Braden Smith still does, he had 2 assists last game, but I think he should still be.
For no reason in particular, it would have been great if he, had a few more assists today for just because. Had nothing to do with, me or any, financial gain I had to standing, it would have been great if he had a few more assists today. He only had 2.
His prop was 6.5, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had hit 5 in a row. So yeah.
I thought about betting on that one. I ultimately decided no, I don't think so.
Lance Jones took them all. Lance Jones got all the assists today.
He did. All right, Iowa 88, Michigan 78. I posted some hot takes today on Twitter, and I wish I would have waited to post those because I had a really hot take that I want to get you guys' thoughts on before we get to the game. My hot take is that Juwan Howard will still be the coach of Michigan next year. It will actually be Phil Martelli that is the fall man who will get fired, and Juwan Howard will stay the coach. Sonny, your thoughts?
I pray that you're right. You know, Brad Underwood 7-0 against Juwan Howard. You know what? You could be right because all the Michigan people I talk to all say that he's coming back next year. You know, it's the national guys who kind of say that he's gone. You know, just based on how the season has gone. So, but I mean, it's a hot take, but I think it's a take that's pretty common in the Wolverine community.
That's what I've been hearing from some Michigan people too. Is that like at least the Michigan administration, like they don't view as poorly of Juwan Howard as the fan base or others seem to. Frank, what do you think?
I mean, I feel like it's a definite possibility. You know, the entire situation is really just confusing. Last time I was on the show was right when Juwan might be getting fired tonight, like whole thing broke.
The fight and stuff, yeah.
The fight. But I'm Sonny. I'm in your camp in that I hope so. In that he's gotten really talented players, but he's kind of underperformed, honestly, in my opinion. He runs a really fun offense though. Like they really can manufacture some really good shots in some creative ways. They've been running some like 5-out delay. That's pretty fun to watch. So I do enjoy it from that perspective as someone who's really big into X's and O's, but I honestly don't know. I know the entire situation is extremely confusing though. And it's going to be a roller coaster ride this offseason with respect to what happens in Michigan for sure.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. And I mean, that's what Juwan Howard is known for, getting in good talent, but, you know, just not really being able to produce that talent to the expectations. And I'm not saying like, you know, he finishes middle of the pack and you know, in the Big Ten, he's last in the Big Ten right now. I don't know if he is by conference. No, Rutgers is last by conference record, but he has the worst record in the Big Ten overall right now. So, Sonny, Iowa beats Michigan 88-78. This was a good game for Iowa. Michigan was at home, and Juwan Howard did not have the Fab Five with him, so they did not beat Iowa like they did Ohio State. Sorry, I keep going back to them. I'm in pain right now. It's okay. Let me live. What were your thoughts on the game, Sonny?
You know, I'm pretty sure Michigan was up at half because I remember scrolling through the scoreboard, and you know, you kind of like, oh, are they kind of sort of figuring things out? And then I kind of checked back in on the game an hour, 15 minutes later, and it's a 10-point loss to an Iowa team that's just, you know, kind of okay. You know, I want to say that I feel bad for him, but I don't. You know, it's just a team where you have one really good basketball player and others, or you have another. I forgot was it Terrence Williams? Is that the name?
Yeah, there's a few arguable. Nkamwa is good. Terrence Williams, he's pretty good, and
I do like
Doug
Terrence.
McDaniel.
Yeah, Doug, of course, is Doug. Yeah. You know, again, the suspension thing makes no sense to me, but that's Michigan for you. You know, it's just a team that's, you know, we just talked about earlier about teams, Ohio State being, you know, discombobulated. I have no idea what's going on in Michigan up there right now. You know, I don't know who's coaching every game. Juwan Howard just seems to want to take days off or something like that. It's, I don't know. It's every year they seem to be taking a step down, and I'm very interested, and I have vested interest to see what happens the remainder of the season, whether he can up his record a little bit, because right now, I mean, if they end up with 3-4 wins in conference, how do you bring him back?
I don't know. That's the same thing I'm asking. My other question I'm asking is, how is Jalen Llewellyn okay with what is going on with Doug McDaniel right now? Because he plays nearly 30 minutes in road games, but then they come back home, and it's like Juwan Howard just looks at him, and he's like, you can go sit the bench now. Doug's back. You know, study hall's not in session, so...
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's so weird. I mean, Llewellyn's played well, too.
Exactly.
And he's played well in the absence of McDaniel. And so like a Division I coaching staff can't figure out a way to get both those guys on the court together or manufacture offense through both of them. So looking into
Especially when
this,
Burnett is not. I mean, he's not anything special, right?
no, he's not.
I'm not saying he's
He's a
bad, but
good
he's not
player.
special.
He's a good player, but yeah, he's not. He's a typical run of the mill Big Ten player. I mean, he's not in that upper echelon, let's say.
Right.
But you know, I did some looking into like how much does Doug McDaniel change the dynamic of this team when he's off the court. Their net rating is 7.6. When he's on the court, it's 41.9. So effective field goal percentage goes up 10% when Doug McDaniel's on the court. True shooting goes up 10%. Turnovers decrease. Assist to turnover ratio increases. So they must see something because that's a drastic change in net rating to go from 7 to 42 with him on and off the court is crazy. But I'm going back to the Purdue Michigan game. Llewellyn played really well. I mean, I think he had over 15 points and was pretty efficient from three. And he was kind of the one guy that was giving Purdue trouble in what would have been an otherwise pretty easy win. But it's just, and my wife and I were watching a Michigan game and she was asking questions. She's doing a good job of trying to like learn some of the personnel. And she's like, so what's the story with Michigan? I'm like, well, they're their best player. He can only play in home games. And she's like, why? And I'm like, it's some academic thing. She's like, it sounds like he's on house arrest. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad you said it. It's like, there's a whole lot of like confusion. And she's like, I remember their coach. He punched the other coach from Wisconsin. I'm like, yeah, that happened. And then she's like, what's going on with him? Like, well, he just decides sometimes he doesn't want to coach. I'm not really sure. Like, it's just the weirdest season, for this Michigan team. I don't fully understand it, but and with regards to this particular game, I mean, it was back and forth until the very end when Iowa finally pulled away, but Tony Perkins has been on fire lately. 20 plus points in 3 straight games now. I mean, Peyton Sanford had a really, really good game. And like every time Michigan started cutting it close or making it a game or would pull ahead, like he would hit that 3 to just like even things out. It's like, okay, like the run stops now, or like your ability to come back in this game like ends right now. It was just the timeliness of every 3 he hit. 6 for 8 is just a really, really efficient game from him. This is a game, honestly, I really had a difficult time getting into from like an emotional standpoint. It was just kind of boring, even though it was a high scoring game. It just wasn't a really entertaining game. And I don't mean no disrespect to either of these teams or their fans or anything like that. It just struggled to capture my attention.
No, I can see that. And just for reference really fast, Jalen Llewellyn on the road, he averages 25 minutes per game. At home, he averages 3 minutes per game. So, I don't know. A power Big Ten Division I coach should be able to figure out how to distribute those minutes a little bit better. But back to your point, yes, Tony Perkins was excellent in this game, and Peyton Sanford, this is what you need from him if Iowa is going to compete at the level they want to compete at in the top half of the Big Ten. Now, I do think Iowa probably is the top half of the Big Ten team, talent-wise, and with who they should be, but I don't think they always play like it every single week, but they did go into Michigan and get the win there, and so you have to give them credit there with what they did. I really like Owen Freeman. I think Owen Freeman is the next star with this Iowa team. That's what I kind of talked about with them, was like I didn't know who that star scorer was going to be because you had the Murray brothers, you had Luka Garza. It was Garza, right? Not Garcia. I keep wanting to say Garcia, but it's Garza. He was, big time scorer before them, and it's like, who is that next guy going to be? And Peyton Sanford has been that at times this year, but not always, and that's kind of what you get with a shooter, right? You're not going to get that as often. But I feel like Owen Freeman can be that guy next in the coming years. He's probably not going to be it this year. He's still just a freshman, but in the coming years, I feel like he can be that guy. Sonny, is it crazy to think that Owen Freeman could turn into a big-time scorer for Iowa someday?
Anyone can turn into a big-time scorer for Iowa. I mean, they're a program that loves to run and love to score, and Fran, he's got that offense, the offensive side down pat. So it's not a stretch at all.
Yeah. What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, definitely, and that's something I had circled on this game too was Owen Freeman, and Another guy, who doesn't play a ton of minutes, but his numbers are off the chart when he does, has been Brock Harding. And I think the two of them in the future. I mean, Brock Harding, if you look at his, assist numbers, I think like 35% assist percentage, which is crazy. Like it's crazy as a true freshman. Again, it's a guy who doesn't play a ton of minutes, but yeah, Owen Freeman, like it's you watch him play, it's easy to forget that he's a freshman as well. But I think those two guys with Freeman's down low post up ability, his defense has been really, really good. I think those two are the future for this Iowa team.
Yeah, and I think the future of this Iowa team looks bright. They're playing 3 freshmen regularly, and Freeman, Harding, and I forget how to say the one guy's last name, Dembele. And so, yeah, if they can continue on with that. And really the only guys they're losing are Perkins and Creaky. And I haven't even checked if they have eligibility past the I'll have to check that afterward if they have COVID eligibility left remaining. But yeah.
So they're not losing any of the brothers, is that right?
No, McCaffrey is a senior.
I feel like it's been like 10 straight years they've had brothers on their team. It's crazy. Like going back to the Murray brothers and yeah.
If McCaffrey is gone after the season, does Fran retire?
I don't think so. I think he enjoys it. Yeah. He's having fun. Yeah, he likes getting thrown out of games, and yeah.
I love Fran.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't like him, but
I think a lot of Iowa fans take him for granted. I mean, every couple of years he has them contending for the Big Ten, and even years where they're not that great, they're so fun to watch. And he's a coach I wouldn't mind having as a leader of my program.
Oh, and he's like the most winningest coach in Iowa history, right? It's just kind of how it goes. So,
and one thing about Fran's teams, you can never count them out of games. Like you think like they're down 15, they're down 20, and they can easily come back and win. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, JR.
No, you're good. I was going to end it there and ask if anybody has any thoughts. So appreciate you filling that in there. So all right, that's all I have for the Big Ten this week. Thank you everybody for watching. We are going to be doing a football show on Tuesday. It's going to be an all Nebraska show because I got the Nebraska podcast with Big Banter coming on, and I have Justin with me one more Tuesday for football. And then after that, we'll have another basketball show on Wednesday. Did you want to say something, Sonny?
Yeah. Joe, I told a few Illini fans to tune into this episode just because I wanted to let them know that after every game, I've been getting a lot of mentions and a lot of feedback about this idea, and I've been kind of hesitant to do it, but I'm going to go ahead and do it for Tuesday night's game. At the conclusion of the game, I'm going to come on with a live recap, and I'll be taking in phone calls. So if you're one of those Illini fans, I know you guys are a very passionate base. My mentions see it, every time I refresh it. Feel free to give us a call. Air out your grievances. We'll see. Ohio State's a team we should win, but they got a really good guard. And so, I'm not taking it for granted. It's very hard to win on the Big Ten road.
Very nice of you to give some credit to the Buckeyes. I appreciate that, Sonny. We'll see what happens there. And definitely go, if you're an Illinois fan, go check out Sonny over at the Illinicast, his call-in show, and air your grievances or sing your praises, whatever it's warranted after the game, I suppose. So, Frank, you guys got anything coming up with the Boiler Express you want to hit on before we get out of here?
Yeah, we've all been hit with the boulder that is life lately, so we've been a little not in our normal cadence, we'll say, but we're picking that back up this week. And Dylan's doing a really cool thing with some members of the Purdue hockey team on Wednesday. So that'll be a really, really cool episode. I wish I was able to join for that. Unfortunately, I have another obligation, but it's going to be a really cool one. I can't wait to go back and listen to that one after the fact.
Very cool. Yeah, if you're a Purdue hockey fan, go check it out. So thank you, everybody, for watching, and thank you to Sonny and Frank for coming on. We appreciate it. Join us Tuesday night for football, or if you're more of a basketball fan, join us Wednesday night for our next basketball episode. We appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.